Smith Show starts right now.
We got another NBA duo. We got two more superstars teamed up. We got every reason to be optimistic. Right? Houston? Earth to Houston. Westbrook and Harden are together again. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80, and on ESPN News. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on ESPN News. And we had another blockbuster. There can be no rest for the weary. The NBA offseason just keeps coming. Last night, ESPN NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski dropped the bomb that Russell Westbrook had been traded from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Houston Rockets for Chris Paul, 2 first-round picks, and 2 pick swaps. 2 contracts that were almost seen as immovable were moved for each other. Russell Westbrook is 1 year into a 5-year, $200 million deal, the last of which pays him $47 million. And Chris Paul is basically operating under the same contract, just 1 year further along. So the Thunder get a year's worth of salary cap relief and 2 more picks to their growing arsenal of first-round draft picks. If you want to know what the future looks like, at least in terms of the NBA draft, if you want to know who owns the NBA draft, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder and the New Orleans Pelicans. Might as well just have a 2-man draft with those teams and those general managers, David Griffin and Sam Presti, figuring out who goes where from now into eternity. But the real questions, the real analysis lies in Houston. How does this work? How can it work? Will it work? No. Russell Westbrook and James Harden together. I know everybody wants to get excited. I do. That's what we do, right? That's what we do after a trade. It's easy to see optimism. It's easy to play on paper. You know what it's easy to do? It's easy to play fantasy basketball or NBA Jam and pretend like this is an individual sport. I mean, folks act like this is Federer and Nadal on the same doubles team just because they're great at singles. By the way, they're playing right now at Wimbledon in the Wimbledon semifinals, and Federer's up 1-0 on Rafa Nadal. But basketball's not an individual sport. It's a team sport. It's not simply about talent accumulation. And in the case of Russell Westbrook and James Harden, you've accumulated talent that is almost identical to each other. Russell Westbrook and James Harden are 2 of the most ball-dominant point guards in the NBA. Both have usage rates approaching 35%. They're in the top 4 in the league in isolation play. They're in the top 4 in the league in usage rate. They're in the top 4 in the league in drives to the basket. And they are, when it comes to Russell Westbrook, near the bottom of the league when it comes to three-point shooting, spot-up shooting, catch and shoot. Russell Westbrook shot 29% from 3 last year. Russell Westbrook shot 40% on spot-up jumpers. Russell Westbrook was near the bottom of the league in catch-and-shoot opportunities. Do you know who wasn't? Chris Paul. Chris Paul, abrasive personality, prickly with his teammates, floor general who understands basketball, and Chris Paul who's capable of playing off the ball. Are the Rockets better today than they were yesterday? I know everybody's excited, and I know everybody wants to play NBA Jam, and I know that they're better on paper, and they've accumulated more talent, but I don't know that the Rockets are better at team basketball today than they were yesterday. I don't know that James Harden and Russell Westbrook together are better than James Harden and Chris Paul. And I'm not the only one that understands this problem. I'm not the only one that realizes there's a riddle to be solved and there's a possibility that the riddle is unsolvable. Here's Royce Young, ESPN's NBA reporter on Freddie and Fitzsimmons.
the Rockets were far and away the preferred destination for Russell Westbrook. He wanted to reunite with James Harden, who's one of his close friends in the NBA. And as both those guys really, Freddie, they want to rewrite the narratives about him. And they feel like they could kind of do that together. They both had pretty public postseason failures. And they feel like that why not just get together and see if they can correct some of that stuff.
I appreciate the optimism. I do. I appreciate the desire to change. I appreciate the idea that winning is above all. But how much can Russell Westbrook and James Harden change? Can a tiger really change its stripes? You're talking about two players that are 30 years old and approaching 30 years old. You're talking about guys who've been playing in the NBA for almost a decade. You're talking about guys who've been on their own, running their own team for years now, who've both been the man, who've both been alphas to the extreme. And now I'm supposed to believe just because they want to change a few narratives, they can change who they are? Just because they're finally at the point in their careers where they want to put winning above everything else, that they can change who they are? That just because you put two individuals together, you make a great duo? I got into an argument this morning on First Take with ESPN NBA analyst Ryan Hollins. I said, I can't put these guys right now in the top 5 of NBA duos. I have to respect what people have done, and I have to respect the idea that you must fit together on the basketball court. You can't simply play NBA Jam. You can't simply play fantasy basketball. You can't take the biggest names and just put them side by side and think that's going to work. I just feel like as you walk out today on the big day after news, there's two different things that you fight. I don't want to be the stick in the mud. I don't want to be the turd in the punch bowl. I don't want to be the guy at the after party unwilling to knock a few back. But I do want to be the guy who's willing to see it the way it is. And on the day after a massive trade like this, there's an impulse, an instinct to do two things. To simply be excited, be optimistic, think the sky is the limit because you've got two incredible basketball players together, and to never say a harsh word. Never ask the real question. Never ask, does this work? Ryan Hollins, by the way, is going to be joining us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. in just a few moments. Stephen A. Smith, though, the man himself, was on SportsCenter last night. He came on First Take as well this morning. He said he recognized that this is a riddle. He recognized that this fit is a problem, but he puts it all squarely on one man's shoulders.
My only question mark is whether or not Mike D'Antoni can coach them on that level. We know he can win regular season games. We know he can win a couple of playoff series. But can he coach them in the manner that they need to be coached to get them over the hump? That's the lone question mark about the Houston Rockets after this deal. I see no other question marks to think of.
What I told Stephen A. this morning is that you might be tasking Mike D'Antoni with an impossible task. You might be asking him to solve an unsolvable riddle. I understand the pressure now is on Mike D'Antoni. But can he, not just in his own abilities, but can he, in like the realm of possibility, figure out Russell Westbrook and James Harden together? I fear that the answer is no. And I look across the scope of history. I look across the NBA, and I have trouble finding examples of where you have taken two alphas, two guys this ball dominant, two guys with usage rates this high, and brought them together for the greater good. I have trouble finding the example that Mike D'Antoni can follow. But now it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Joining me in studio here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. is my buddy, ESPN NBA analyst Ryan Hollins. What's up, man?
You know what? All the nonsense. You are my guy, Will. No, seriously. Like beyond this, you're my guy. No matter what, you're my guy. You're my guy, bro.
Thank you.
I just want to say that on record before I lace into you.
Okay.
Oh, good, fair.
All right. Defensive posture engaged. Go.
We spoke earlier on First Take, and it's really sinking in of how disgusted I am with you. You gave possibly the worst tag, the worst line, the worst framing to Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Statistically driven, ball hogs, selfish, not a winner. Arguably the worst things you could ever say to or about a basketball player. And to say that these two guys won't fit, nobody's pretending is going to be perfect. And now you question Mike D'Antoni, and I hear, Stephen A., I hear you, brother. But the reality is, there's a system in place in Houston. Is it a championship system? I'm not saying that. I'm not guaranteeing that. Is it going to be seamless? We're not saying that either. But for you to make the statement that it positively will not work, it's an uphill battle, and that you don't believe these guys are going to or will change, I lose my marbles when I hear that, Will.
All right, so a couple things here. The key about a conversation and the key about debate is to be sure you understand what the other guy is saying. You have failed.
Oh, I heard you.
You have failed step number one. You will win debates on points that I do not make. I did not say that these guys are stat chasers, ball hoggers, and not interested in winning.
You didn't say they were stat chasers. We literally had a segment about their stats.
Listen now. I was asked a question. Will stat chasing be a problem in Houston? And I asked you a series of questions. We can do it again right now. Has Russell Westbrook ever chased stats?
In moments, but that doesn't necessarily apply.
Has James Harden ever chased stats?
I believe in moments.
So why would I believe that two guys who in the past has, by your own admission, chased stats? And you're right about that. We all know it. Anybody that's watched can see that, whether or not that's going for a triple-double in Russell Westbrook's case or chasing a 30-point streak in James Harden's case. Why would I believe that something that has been a problem in the past suddenly go away when you put them together?
See, that's where I have a problem with you. Because you said that it was actually a problem. If I'm not mistaken, your point guard averaging a triple-double. And keep in mind, these are different triple-doubles that Russell Westbrook had. See, in the past, these were 20, 25, 29 points, 10 and 10. This last season, he was comfortable scoring 10 points. Why? Because he sacrificed his offense, his usage, the ball in his hands to make sure that Paul George got his shots, got his looks, made sure that Steven Adams was getting those lobs at the rim. Those are plays that he made for others. In terms of James Harden, we both agreed. I don't want to put you say I mess up everything you say. You said James Harden needed to score, right? Because they were around 12th, 13th in the Western Conference and climbed into the 4th spot. We're talking to Houston Rockets now. So correct me if I'm wrong. You agree he had to score, right?
James Harden?
James Harden.
Yes, he absolutely did at times.
So there's a difference, and I will acknowledge, because I'm not going to say never. If I'm a big man, I'm going to rebound away from a double-double, or I know my teammate is getting there, flirting with a double-double, I'm going to let him get that rebound. If a guy has a 30-point streak going, and there's a difference between me getting fouled and getting free throws or him getting fouled, we know, get this guy the basketball. He's got something going. Within winning, the way you threw it out, challenge these guys' will to win, and you argued that they would be more selfish. I don't know how else to take that statement, Will. There's no open-endedness to say that they are stat-driven, but yet they don't want to win. But yet they're winners.
Sometimes stat-driven or stat-chasing, which that was the question presented to us, will stat-chasing be a problem in Houston? Doesn't occur to the person in the moment, whether or not that be Russell Westbrook or James Harden, as I need one more number, even though I think there are times that actually did enter their minds. It takes the form of, I need to take over. That thing you're describing, do I need to get the points? Should I grab the rebound? It's the alpha sense of, I'm the one that must take over. Now you have two guys on one team who both have the mindset of, now I must take over. Now, am I going to be right that that is a potential problem? First of all, I did not condemn them to the bottom of the Western Conference. What I did is say, I don't know that this adds up to contention for an NBA title. I don't know that this adds up to a top 5 duo in the NBA. Now, I want to tell you a quick little story, okay? Ryan Hollins here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Will Cain filling in.
You want to do your duo list over a little bit?
No, I don't. I want to talk to you about a story I have to tell you. Here's the story I have to tell you. couple years ago, I was on First Take, all right?
Okay.
And the Houston Rockets had just pulled off a sign and trade for Chris Paul from the Los Angeles Clippers.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone did the exact same thing then that they were doing today. They were saying, this is incredible. This is two superstars on the same team. What a wonderful accumulation of talent. Watch what happens with the Rockets. And I said, how are they going to work out who handles the ball? How is this thing going to fit together? I asked a lot of the same questions then about that pairing that I'm asking today about Russell Westbrook. Hold on. In the meantime,
You're doing more than asking questions, bro.
The Rockets go.
You're doing more than asking questions.
In the meantime,
you're doing more than asking questions.
In the meantime, the Rockets make it to the Western Conference Finals, make it to the Western Conference Semifinals, lose out twice, and ultimately figure out that Chris Paul and James Harden not just can't play together, don't want to play together. The problems that I brought up,
That's wrong, bro.
Years ago.
I can't let you just say that.
You're going to get a chance to correct
leave that
it.
statement like
You're
that.
gonna
Go
get
ahead.
a chance to
Go
correct
ahead.
it. The problems that I pointed out a year ago took a moment, took a minute, but ultimately, as time passed, came true. Today, you're super excited about Russell Westbrook and James Harden.
Absolutely.
2 or 3 years from now, you're going to be saying the things that I'm saying today and acting like you came up with the ideas.
So let me lay this out. Because I had the same concerns, but Chris Paul and James Harden overexceeded what I thought, what I would have seen. My questions were for Chris Paul to be able to score the basketball. Would he be able to score and play make at a high enough clip for Houston to be successful? In all reality, when Chris Paul went out, and we all acknowledge, they were a game short of being NBA champs. They're a game short of beating the greatest basketball team that we had ever seen play the game. I'm talking the Golden State Warriors. So am I going to look back and say you came a game short of winning, that season or that duo or that tandem was a failure? They overexceeded. This last year, Chris Paul, after he put his body on the line, Father Time catches up, cannot play at the same clip. Then excuses mixed with lack of action snowballs to the fact where you had to move on from Chris Paul. And I guarantee if Chris Paul had his exact same spats, but he played at the level of basketball that he played the year before and the year prior, he wouldn't be moved. He would not be traded. But if, and only if, Russell Westbrook comes available and Chris Paul can't play the same basketball, now he's moved, Will. So I do not agree with you. If anything, for me, they overexceeded expectations. And as a former player, I can't call that a failure when you lost to the eventual champs. It was a successful pairing, and they found a way to make it work.
Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A., hanging out with ESPN NBA analyst Ryan Hollins, talking about the Russell Westbrook trade to the Houston Rockets. Does it work? Will it fit? Let me run a couple of things by you, okay? Seriously.
So you admit you're wrong. Is that what you admit you're wrong?
No.
Slightly.
You think you're going to slip in a W?
I'm not slipping it in. You're wrong.
In between my thoughts? Let me ask you a couple questions.
What?
Who's a better three-point shooter, Chris Paul or Russell Westbrook?
Chris Paul.
Who's a better catch and shoot option on the floor, Chris Paul or Russell Westbrook?
Chris Paul.
Who's a better fit next to James Harden, Chris Paul or Russell Westbrook?
Russell Westbrook.
I'm sorry. How did one and one
It's
add
more
up
than
to
that.
three?
It's not black and white. You're not going to make it about one
I
thing.
guess I had lost on the math. The math was adding up, and you got to three.
Let me give you an element.
What's one? You said one. I said, what's 1 + 1? You said 3.
Well, you break down every sport in the NBA, and you do a heck of a job at it. Last year, not only did I color commentate, analyze games, break down films, break down every single team in the NBA, I had to see how James Harden was doing the impossible. We've never seen a jump shooter score points, and not just points, wins consistently, back to back to back to back. And one thing James Harden was so intelligent at, and I would even phrase it as he cracked the code of basketball. He figured it out. He had to literally go from playing at this hellish pace that the Houston Rockets ran at, and he had to pace himself. He had to slow himself down. And if you actually tracked it, I believe he was the slowest moving, he and LeBron James, basketball players in the entire NBA. What does that mean? He needed a break. He could not do it all himself. And there are a lot of times in the regular season, Chris Paul was missing, and when he got back, was not quite Chris
Ryan,
Paul.
You're being charitable. That's the thing.
Hold on. Well, I'm going to tell you, I throw that in there. Now I have a guy I can take turns with, and now I can spot up and shoot while he attacks the rim. And I guarantee one thing. In a D'Antoni system, keep in word, system, everything, I know what I'm getting. Russell Westbrook will shoot the basketball better. It won't be as hectic.
You're being optimistic. You're being charitable. If I were being mean, I would say you're being an apologist. Why is James Harden one of the slowest on the floor? One of the reasons is because he doesn't move when he doesn't have the ball. He doesn't participate in the offense when he's not running the offense. You know it's a fact.
Let me ask you something.
No, you can explain it away as though he's tired, or you can explain it as that
himself.
he is disengaged when he's not running
let me
it.
ask you
now
something,
you
though.
brought a guy in who must be running the offense. Westbrook cannot be the guy off the ball. He does not shoot well enough to be the guy off the ball.
Let me ask you something.
I would. Okay, go ahead. Ask me something.
Who's going to create shots for him?
For who?
James Harden.
Most of the time, James Harden creates his own shot.
But let's just say, because he's incredibly
You
intelligent.
gave it
James
this morning.
Harden.
Who led the league?
Hold on.
Who led the league in unassisted baskets?
That's not
this
even
year?
what I'm saying.
But
Listen,
who was it?
It was James Harden.
Oh.
But why? Who else was going to create a shot for him?
Not one of the greatest point guards of the last
He
15
missed
years.
half the season and he couldn't move the same. Who else was going to create a shot for him?
Here's the funny
No,
thing.
answer it.
We're running out of time.
I'm waiting.
Let me ask you a
Because
question.
you can't.
Here's the thing. This is the way it works. This is the way it rolls. Everybody wakes up. They're super excited. They think you're being a hater. They think you're doubting them.
You kind of are.
Right.
You really are.
Or I tell the truth when everybody else wants to be an apologist. And in a couple of years,
Who's an apologist?
maybe even a couple of months, maybe Kobe Bryant will say it again. Kobe Bryant's already said you don't win basketball that way. People have questioned whether or not you can win playing next to Russell Westbrook. Tim Legler has been on the Will Cain show, and he has said, I question whether or not Russell Westbrook can take a secondary role. What I am saying today, others will say down the road. And in some cases, other NBA players have already said. This is how the truth lands in many people's laps. As a haterism, but I can't help you with reality. You have to adjust to it. It's not adjusted to you.
My truth that a lot of people don't look at, Russell Westbrook has been too free in Oklahoma City. He had the ball in his hands. He did whatever he wanted. Fair to say, right? Billy Donovan is a heck of a coach, but he wasn't a coach for the Thunder. I'm just saying, bro. And a lot of the NBA is a players' league is relating to the players. So I'm not throwing Billy under the bus, but Billy didn't fit with Russ. And I believe D'Antoni's system, maybe not his personality, will be better.
All right, that's Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. He's Ryan Hollins, our ESPN NBA analyst. I'm Will Cain, filling in for Stephen A. today. One of the arguments that Ryan and I got into today is that I said I don't believe that Russell Westbrook and James Harden, as we stand here today, are a top 5 duo in the NBA. Ryan did not like that.
Yeah, make sure you name your 5, 6, and 7 too, all right?
I'll do it. Who are the top 5 duos in the NBA? How do Westbrook and Harden fit in? That's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Hey, when you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. Search for greatness. Search Indeed. How high, without having played a single minute, do Westbrook and Harden climb on the top duos in NBA? It's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
This show and all of ESPN is streaming live on the ESPN app. Now with ESPN Plus, where you get more ESPN. Download the ESPN app today and take ESPN everywhere.
Melvin Gordon, the Los Angeles Chargers running back, has told his team either sign me to an extension or trade me. The Chargers, who are in their championship contention window. The Chargers, one of the best and most well-rounded rosters in the NFL. Melvin Gordon, one of the best running backs in the NFL, are suddenly at an impasse. Here is Adam Schefter laying it all out for you on SportsCenter.
They're not close at all, which is why he chose today to come out and make that statement that unless there is a new contract before training camp opens in about 10 days, he will not show up then, nor will he show up at all this season until he has a new deal. And if he doesn't have a new deal, then he would like to be traded if the Chargers are not prepared to give him one. Now, the two sides have had talks, but they are not close at this point in time, so much so that, again, he felt compelled to come out and make this statement, and this leads to a very tricky situation in which each side is going to make its case before training camp. The Chargers feel like they've made a fair offer. Melvin Gordon feels like he should be paid amongst the top running backs in the game, right in the category. He's just not going to show up when he's scheduled to make $5.6 million.
Melvin Gordon is in the fifth year, his fifth-year option of his rookie contract. And as you heard Adam Schefter say there on SportsCenter, he's scheduled to make $5.6 million. Now, that is under the amount made by the top running backs in the NFL. As you know, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, Devonta Freeman, they're making figures like $13, $14, $15 million a year. And Melvin Gordon feels like the flashpoint. Melvin Gordon feels like the moment, the correction. Melvin Gordon feels like the story that dictates not just the future of the Los Angeles Chargers, not just Melvin Gordon's own finances, but the future of the running back position in the NFL.
Yes, so I've heard the news.
Another significant NBA trade
Russell Westbrook is going to Houston.
to the Rockets for Chris Paul and first-round picks in 2024 and 2026.
How about the Houston Rockets now? Russell Westbrook, clearly a more athletic point guard who's unstoppable one-on-one, who can get to the hole at will, more formidable offensively than CP3.
If Chris Paul is not in a Thunder uniform, it'd be more likely to trade.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Russell Westbrook and James Harden together in the new league of dynamic duos. Where exactly does this duo rank? Is it top 5? It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. And ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance, protecting commercial vehicles and offering specialized coverages designed to protect your business. More at progressivecommercial.com. Here's where I have them. Here's where I have Westbrook and Harden as top duos in the NBA. This presumes health, and this presumes everybody was playing today. Number one, I believe LeBron James and Anthony Davis are the top duo in the NBA. I believe they fit together basketball-wise. I think youth is on their side in terms of Anthony Davis being 26. And I just think you have two of the top 7 players in the NBA in Anthony Davis and LeBron James. At number 2, Steph and Clay. I believe in what's been proven. It's the core of not just a championship team, but the core of a dynasty. These two guards together win. At number 3, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Although they haven't been together on the floor yet, these two-way wings are going to be a defensive force. And Kawhi is capable of taking over and answering the questions we still have to see whether or not Paul George can answer. At number 4, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Got to see how Kevin Durant comes back from that injury. I presumed health, but I cannot presume he comes back at 100%. I'll presume, as the statistics show, he comes back something like 10% less of who he was before. And Kyrie Irving is still an enigma. How will he fit in with all those young guys in Brooklyn? How will he fit in with Kevin Durant? Just because they're buddies now doesn't mean they're going to be buddies after playing together for 3 or 4 more months. And that's why those kind of questions, I don't have Westbrook and Harden in my top 5. At number 5, I have Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. Young, already accomplished, Western Conference semifinals, one MVP candidate among the pair, and Murray is on his way up. This pairing plays well together. This pairing fits, not just on paper, but on the basketball court. We can't say that about Westbrook and Harden yet. We can also say that Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton at number 6 are ahead of Westbrook and Harden. Giannis is the league MVP. Middleton is an all-star. And I'm also going to place at number 7 the Portland Trailblazers duo of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum above Westbrook and Harden. There are no questions about whether or not these guys play well together, whether or not they like playing together, about how they can be the engine of this team. All those questions are unanswered for Westbrook and Harden, who I have coming in then at number 8. And that's a close one, with Simmons and Embiid at 9 and Luka and Kristaps Porzingis at 10. That's your top 10 duos in the NBA. Harden and Westbrook, not top 5. Not with those questions left unanswered. Let's go to Chris in Canada. What's up, Chris? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hi, Will. Pleasure to speak to you. I just want to say this. At first, when you first started, I didn't really care too much for you, but now I'm a Will Cain soldier in the Will Cain Army.
Thank you, Chris. For what it's worth,
you're welcome.
Your experience with me is that of every single person I know, from those in the audience to those that I'm married to. I grow on you. I'm like a fungus in that way. Go ahead.
I like that you're a contrarian also. I find that fascinating. But I have to rank, based on body of work, Clay and Steph as number 1. LeBron and Anthony Davis, their games, they look compatible, but we don't know, because if you take the historical NBA picture and you look at where LeBron went in Miami and how that worked out the first year, and you look at KD when he first came to the Warriors, there were struggles. There was adjustment period.
Absolutely.
If we're just rating on skill, I agree with your list. But as far as compatibility and simpatico to play together, I can't. Clay and Steph have to be number 1.
So I like your analysis, Chris. Thanks for the call. I think when you're putting this list together, you have to balance a couple of things. As you point out, it's not simply how talented are the two people that we're putting into a duo. That's when we start playing fantasy basketball. That's when we start playing NBA Jam. And that's when we actually act like it's just a two-man game. It's not a matter of adding up the talent of Westbrook and Harden together. And for that matter, you know what we could do? We could rank all these players 1 to 15 or 1 to 20 and say, well, the duo with the lowest number is the best duo. I mean, think about that. What, in my estimation, LeBron James is I would rank him 3rd best player in the NBA currently, and Anthony Davis is the 7th best player in the NBA. That would give them a cumulative number of 10, right? And it also would be the lowest number you could probably get between two duos, between two members of a duo. I mean, you put Kawhi, who I have at 2, and Paul George, who probably comes in around number 10, and you're looking at a cumulative score of 12, which LeBron and AD are lower than. But it's not just a game of who gets the lowest score on individual talent ranking. It's not that. It's also not just what you've seen proven on the floor. I respect what Chris laid out, that Clay and Steph have proven it, and I weight that in. I love that, because everything else is speculation. That's real. That's tangible. But it's not just that, because we have to respect how good LeBron and AD are. We have to be able to look into the future. We have to be able to project. And then third, we do need to entertain the idea of fit. And I think conceptually, LeBron and Anthony Davis fit together. Their games should work together. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George fit together. Their games should work together. Russell Westbrook and James Harden do not fit together. Their games should not be complementary. Now, maybe, as Ryan Hollins, who just got done sitting here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain filling in, maybe, as Ryan Hollins in all his optimism, or those of you out there that are super excited, in all your optimism, think Mike D'Antoni will figure this out. Or think James Harden and Russell Westbrook will change their games. Their egos will suddenly become less prominent. One of them will take a secondary role. Maybe you're right. But right now, in theory, on paper, with the evidence that we have behind us, with numerous years of their individual games, you cannot project that fit between the two is something that works. Paolo in Los Angeles. What's up, Paolo? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hey, man, but I honestly just want to say that I like the Utah duo of Gobert, Conley, or Conley and Mitchell, or even Mitchell and Gobert over Russ and Harden.
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I like how you didn't know exactly where to narrow it down. I had Mitchell and Conley down as the duo, and I'll tell you where I had them. I ranked for you my top 10. Just outside of the top 10, it looked something like this. Kemba Walker and Jason Tatum in Boston, roughly around 11. The Jazz duo, which if we're doing it, it's probably Mitchell and Gobert as the duo that rises to the top. We'll see how Mike Conley fits in there and if he's one of the top 2 players in that fit at 12. And then I think we got to start talking about Oladipo and Brogdon somewhere after that. I like the Jazz. And you know what's more important than that? I like the Jazz as a team. Because we can talk this duo stuff up all we want. But this is a team game, a 5-man game, a 7-8 deep game, a chemistry, a scheme, an offense, a defense game. That's the point in the end of why I'm skeptical of the Westbrook and Harden pairing. It's great for talent accumulation. And I'll tell you something else. I even get it from a front office move from Daryl Morey. From a basketball move, though, an on-the-court move, if you don't have skepticism today, it's because you're caught up in the moment. If you don't have skepticism today, it's because you're an eternally optimistic human being. If you don't have skepticism today, maybe it's because you're friends with one of these dudes and you're an apologist. Because if you remove yourself slightly from the fervor of the moment, you end up in a place the guys like Kobe Bryant end up. You don't win in the NBA with that kind of basketball. You end up in a place where guys like Paul George end up. I'd rather play with Kawhi Leonard than Russell Westbrook. If you take a breather and you step back, you can see the messages out there, not just from me, but from other people who are willing to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Does this make sense? Or are we playing NBA Jam? I'll bring a guy on a little bit later who has some serious reservations about this, and we need to talk about where does Chris Paul end up, because the NBA's off-season excitement and movement, the free agency and trade treadmill doesn't stop now. It just shifts to Oklahoma City. Where does Chris Paul end up? Where does he fit? Because there's some people out there raising serious questions about whether or not Chris Paul's worth it, what kind of leader he is. So does he fit on your team? It's a Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain filling in. If you missed any of my opening segment, where Hollins and I disagreed, to say the least. Here's the numbers. The Men's World Cup generated $6 billion. Last year, in 2018. The Women's World Cup generated $131 million. $6 billion to $131 million. The men's player pool is paid out from a pool of $400 million. The women's player pool amounted to $30 million, much lower. And that's the number people like to point to. 400 big, 30 low. Discrimination. The men's player pool payout of $400 million, for what it's worth, by the way, is 7% of $6 billion. The women's payout of $30 million on a pool of $131 million is 20%. The women get 20%. The players receive 20% of the total revenues, where the men receive 7%. The economic reality underneath the conversation is that more people watch men's soccer across the globe. The World Cup pool is not just a little, but massively bigger. And you can point to, well, the Women's World Cup outrates the men's game. The Women's World Cup final outrated the men's final in the United States of America, where the U.S. women's team was playing. Of course it outrated. I don't even remember who was in the Men's World Cup final. I don't know. Germany and the Netherlands. I don't know. What was it? Brazil versus France. I don't know. And you don't either. Because we don't watch the World Cup for teams that don't involve the U.S. Not for the masses, not for the most of us. We watch when the U.S. is in. So, of course, the ratings are going to be higher in the U.S., but you think that echoes across the globe? Think it's the same? It's not even close. The reality is, in countries like Spain and Brazil and France and all across Africa and Asia, women's soccer isn't as popular as it is in the United States of America. And thus, the number of people watching the World Cup is vastly different, and the scale is vastly smaller. That's why the World Cup payout is so much less. $6 billion to $131 million.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Let me tell you something about everybody so pumped up about Westbrook and Harden together in H-Town. I don't hate it. For those of you in H-Town, I don't hate that Daryl Morey apparently has steel ones. I don't hate that he has risk tolerance that should be the envy of most men in any business. What I am, though, is someone unwilling to ride the fervor of optimism to ignore the truth. There's this trend, man, of like everything is top five. This is the best. That's top five. This is going to work. That's going to be great. It's the best thing I've ever seen. I got an argument today on First Take with Damian Woody about Melvin Gordon. You know, Melvin Gordon has asked for a trade from the Los Angeles Chargers. Either extend me or trade me, said running back Melvin Gordon. And we got into a debate today. Damian Woody and myself, Will Cain, filling in for Stephen A. Smith on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. We got into an argument today of whether or not Melvin Gordon is elite. And I said Melvin Gordon is not elite. Great? Yes. Elite? No. Not everybody gets to be elite. It's not a participation medal society. You can't have 10 elite running backs. In my estimation, you can't have 5 elite running backs. About 10% of any given profession is elite. And that, by the way, is being generous. Elite should probably be higher. More restrictive than 10%. So is Melvin Gordon a top 3 running back in the NFL? I think not. You can tell me differently. 888-729-3776 on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. I mean, if you start asking guys, like, hey, is so-and-so an elite running back? You're going to get to 10 or 12. You matter of fact, you know what? If you said, hey, is so-and-so a top 5 player in the NBA? Is so-and-so a top 5 duo in the NBA? If you really pressed guys and you kept up with their answers over time, they'd give you about 12 top 5 duos. They'd give you about 15 top 5 running backs in the NFL. Only trick is they know they're never going to get caught. Hey, come out here and be happy, positive. He's top 5. He's top 5. And then a different conversation, sure, he's top 5. Everybody's top 5 before you know it. Nobody ever kept up with the fact you named 15 top 5 guys. Okay?
Yes, sir. I'll make it quick. When you were saying basically that you never seen no backcourt ever in NBA history, I'm old school. The backcourt of Walt Frazier and Cloud and Pearl was the backcourt called the Rolls-Royce backcourt. So that's why I was saying that Westbrook and Harden, I can't see them doing that, getting together. It's a reference on D'Antoni.
You know what, Maurice? Thank you for the old school contribution. I said I'd only really seen it once. I'd really only seen in my secondary role to share the ball. 2 alphas that came together and set aside their egos. They don't get enough credit for it. But they did get titles. 2 of them, in fact. I'll tell you who those are coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show.
One Coast. The Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
Once Chris Paul, the NBA trade and free agent offseason just continues to roll, and the latest on deck, latest to be moved, will be Chris Paul. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, SiriusXM Channel 80, and on ESPN News. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on all those same radio and television channels. So will this work? Will Russell Westbrook and James Harden work together? Let's talk to one guy who knows. It's Ryan Russillo, the host of the Russillo Show podcast, as well as the SVP and Russillo Pod, which will have a new episode out next week. What's up? How are you, Ryan?
I'm great, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. So what do you think? Is this a match made in heaven?
I'm still kind of getting over the whole thing of like when I was telling people, hey, Chris Paul wants to move on. And then I was doing a live podcast with Daryl Morey, and he wasn't really thrilled that I kept saying that. And then they move him. But, that doesn't mean, look, if I'm a GM, I'm not going to tell everybody, hey, I want to trade this guy, or hey, this guy wants out, and I have to move him, because you don't want to ruin his value. So no GM's ever going to say ahead of time, like, yeah, you know what, we probably should move because he doesn't like it. So when I saw it go down, it surprised me a little bit, because I feel like Westbrook's the antithesis of a Daryl Morey type basketball player, right? High usage, low efficiency. And the reason the Chris Paul Harden thing, I believe, worked was that they did an awesome job staggering the minutes. Chris Paul is a terrific three-point shooter, and they actually were pretty close. So I feel like the Paul Harden thing worked, despite the fact that Paul again couldn't stay healthy. So when I think of these two guys playing together now, Westbrook and Harden, I don't know if it's a basketball fit as much as it may have been just Morey looking at assets going, I think Westbrook being younger and being healthier is going to be something that's more valuable on the trade market in a year or two than Chris Paul will be at $40+ million with all of his injuries. So it felt more like an asset management move than it did necessarily them thinking it's the perfect basketball fit.
Ryan Russillo here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. I totally agree with you, man. I'm on the same page as you in that we can just talk about this from a front office perspective for a moment, an asset perspective for a moment. I think if it doesn't work out on the basketball court, then Houston has something more to trade away. They have an asset that's worth more on the market in Russell Westbrook than they did in Chris Paul. I also like, Ryan, just the risk tolerance of Daryl Morey, that he's just going to roll him out there, roll that dice out there, see what happens. So let's just stay on that for a moment. On the asset management side, I agree with you. It seems to be a plus mark. I give Houston and Morey credit for that. Is that, do you think, in the back of his mind, if it doesn't work out, I got a more valuable asset to spin off into something else?
First of all, I think it's in the back of his mind on every single transaction this guy makes. Like, you have to understand his background, whether it's MIT, working for Bill James, working for, I remember like the first time he had been hired by the Celtics. I know Daryl longer, I think, than any other GM that's in the league right now. And I remember when the Celtics interviewed him, actually it wasn't even an interview. New Celtics ownership's buying the team, so we're talking like 02, 03, and they asked Daryl about like some banking thing. I'm not sure the particulars of it, right? But he wasn't even part of their front office. He was just somebody that was advising them on some things. And they immediately were like, how do we hire this guy away? And Daryl wanted to be a GM, and he thought, like, this is how pragmatic he is. He thought the only way I could be a GM with my background is I'll have to make enough money to buy a team one day. And then he actually ended up becoming a GM after not being brought into the front office. So knowing his background, knowing him like this, it's not just this trade, it's every single trade. So we're in total agreement because Westbrook is not the Morey type of player. He just isn't. And Westbrook's contract being what it is, and honestly, the Paul contract is pretty brutal. So they're probably looking at it as like, all right, we're probably trading Paul for the only other contract that somebody would take Paul for. So, Oklahoma City adds all of these picks. They feel like they're stockpiling for the next guy that's mad that maybe they can grab, or maybe they're just thrilled to save a ton of money. But I don't think this is Daryl Morey going, I've loved Westbrook's game.
Right.
I think it's him saying, I can trade this guy in 2 years, and Chris Paul will be untradeable. Ryan
Russillo here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Okay, but let's do the basketball thing for a minute, because they got to figure it out at least in the short term.
Yeah.
Listen, man, you and I have been together a long time. We've done radio together. One of my favorite insults that people like to throw is this kind of open-ended but totally insulting, you don't know basketball. It's the closer in an argument. But what I find funny is that people that say that the most often are guys that were in the game. And I would say it to their face. I would say it to Ryan Hollins, or Stephen A. uses it sometimes, or whoever uses it. But one of the fascinating things I find that a lot of guys that say you don't know basketball, I feel like treat it as though it's NBA Jam or an individual sport. And I get it. You always want more talent on the floor. You always want to trade up for more talent. But you do have to ask yourself at some point, how does this work in a team environment? And I just can't make sense of Westbrook and Harden on the court, set aside the asset stuff, on the court at all.
So I'll answer the second part of that first, because I think there's something there that I want to revisit as far as what kind of pieces you put together. But Westbrook off the ball is a non-entity. He's not involved. Like, I always tell people that, like, tell me the last time you saw Westbrook set a screen for somebody and then roll off of it. Like, it doesn't happen. And, Harden, Chris Paul was a lot of watching each other, but Chris Paul's a terrific three-point shooter. Paul's somebody that can shoot off of the ball, and when the Harden play is breaking down and he's bailing on it, and he has to get the ball to Paul, like, Paul can make that shot. So, Westbrook his shooting numbers have been in decline 3 straight years. I do think if he just could look in the mirror and go, hey, maybe I'd take 5 or 6 less awful shots a game that make no sense and have like no chance of going in. Like even though they're fun and it's cool and a 30-footer goes down. If you just stop shooting those shots, could he become more efficient? There's also an argument that with the spacing that Houston has pulled off the last couple of years, because it's been incredible, like what they've been able to do with their spacing, especially when they go small, is that now maybe all those lanes are wide open. But, part of Chris Paul's frustration with Harden was that when Harden wasn't to play and he was off the ball, he wasn't going to be involved. He wasn't going to do anything. So even if Paul were able to drive, there was always another defender that knew that Harden was kind of ignoring the play. So, again, I'm sure some numbers could counter some of this stuff, but just from watching it, I worry about Westbrook. And this isn't about the regular season because Houston did such a good job staggering minutes, especially that first year where they basically just like, look, when Harden's in, Paul will be out, and vice versa, and we'll close with these guys. But in the playoffs, it's different. So they can stagger it this way, and Westbrook should have more shooting around him than he had in Oklahoma City. But it's 2 guys that really aren't interested in the play when they're not handling the basketball.
Right. So trying to put this together like a math problem, Westbrook's going to have the ball in his hands because he can't play off the ball. You just pointed out that he doesn't work, but he also doesn't shoot well. Chris Paul shot 40% from 3. Westbrook's 29% from 3. So even if he's working over there, he's actually not producing as an off-the-ball player. Meanwhile, Harden he could shoot, but he doesn't. He doesn't work off the ball. So what you're asking yourself is, do I have 2 egos that can actually adapt to this new type of environment? And I just don't know of any evidence over the past 5 years that says the answer to that is going to be yes.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's not do this thing either, like when October rolls around and then it's November, maybe they both average a 30 a game and everybody goes, see, it works. And maybe it will work, but we're not really going to know until all the newness of it all wears off. Now, the one thing, maybe there's more than one thing, but I think the thing that needs to be repeated here is that Harden and Westbrook do like each other, okay?
Right.
And by all accounts, like I was talking to some people last night about it, and I was like, these guys are kind of like pumped to be together. And so if that's like a genuine friendship as opposed to some of these fake NBA celebrities friendships that we've seen in the last couple of years, then maybe that works. And maybe the driving lanes are there. Maybe Harden's more engaged off the ball, and maybe Westbrook takes less bad shots. Maybe he feels like he has more freedom and all this stuff. But it gets back to kind of that other thing that you just brought up, where you argue with basketball players that tell you don't know basketball. There is a puzzle part of this that, in basketball, you want to see, right? Like when Golden State was rolling, it was this perfect combination of things.
Mm-hmm.
But every general manager will tell you, and again, Morey did this with us at this live show in Vegas on Saturday, where he goes, it's pretty simple. I've always agreed with this, but it sounds better when he says it than when I say it, is if you look at all the championships, other than the anomaly that was the Raptors of the past year, because it's certainly an anomaly, it's basically like how many of the top 10, 15, 20 players do you have? Like, how many of those guys do you have, and how many can you add together? So it feels like every general manager, because it's so hard to get these guys, although they're just finding or trying to figure out any possible way to pair the next top 15 guy with the top 15 guy they already have. And if it's imperfect on paper or imperfect when it actually happens, it feels like every GM's default is, I'll just take for the guy and figure it out later. And at least instead of 4 or 5 pieces, I still have one piece that's more valuable on the trade market. I really feel like that's what the job has become.
So in that way, it has become just a talent accumulation. In that way, it has become, if not NBA Jam, just as you said, get 3, 4 of the top 20 players in the league if you can. And what it says to me, Ryan, is teams that are built a certain way, that are more fitting the puzzle together, building it from the bottom up, teams like you could say Denver or Utah or Indiana, who aren't there yet but are putting together pieces in a way that seems to make sense, are ultimately going to fall short because they don't have that top 15 player, that 3 top 15 players formula.
Yeah, if Denver were to pull this off, they win a title this year, which, with how wide open the West feels right now, the Clippers are good, right? I really like Utah. I think the Lakers are actually going to be pretty good here. But we don't know until we see it. I mean, there's a newness to this West now that we just had in the East, where you look at all those top teams, you go, this is kind of the first run at it with a bunch of these teams. And it's hard to figure out exactly who I really love. With the West now, it feels like it's maybe 5 or 6 teams. Portland's like the one team that actually feels similar to what they were last year. So if you're looking at a Denver or a GM saying, hey, you know what, I want my big guy that can shoot, but I want my rebounder who can also shoot at the floor, but I want a 3-and-D guy. I want 2 3-and-D guys with a 3-and-2, but I want a scoring point guard who can hit shots, do all these different things. But I want to make sure it all fits together so there's not too much overlapping. That's probably harder to do that to perfection than it would be to just say, hey, let me see which stars are available if I have enough draft picks. And that's another one thing is that teams are just going, you know what, I don't know that you can really overpay in draft picks for some of these stars, whether it's the Davis trade, certainly the Paul George trade, and there's actually a good chunk of picks in this Westbrook deal, which I think is being overlooked a little bit. So to say, hey, I'm going to execute this great plan over the next 2 or 3 years to have all these 5 complementary pieces, I just don't think that the transaction market works that way. So teams will go, you know what, I'm not going to worry about basketball perfection. I'm just going to say, hey, this doesn't work. I have a top 15 guy I can move now. And despite Westbrook's challenges and some of the things I don't love about his game, there's still I know this sounds cheesy, but an excitement level to his acquisition that would probably still make him marketable for another team that's been boring for years.
The Stephen A. Smith Show is brought to you by the new Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline, now with 4 levels of defense against gunk, wear, corrosion, and friction. Talking to Ryan Russillo, the host of the Russillo Show podcast, and SVP in Russillo, here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. I want to talk to you about Chris Paul before you go, but before I do that, do you think that you talked about how wide open the West is? I've talked about this. I put the number at 9 teams in the NBA who have real reason to tell themselves we could go for it all. We could win it all this year. And I do think the number is 5, 6 in the West, including Portland. And Portland stood pat. I have wondered, here's Houston. They're in the thick of it as it was with Golden State as a super team. Why didn't they just stand pat? In the new NBA, they have a much better shot to contend for a title. Do you think they would have been better standing pat with Chris Paul or doing this deal for Russell Westbrook?
The Paul fit worked. Okay, despite whatever happened, and that loss to Golden State this year is really, I think inexcusable, to be honest with you. After Durant goes down, you're home, you figure this out. It doesn't happen. They were a game away, really, 2 years ago from maybe winning a title. So whenever I hear like, oh, well, that's more time to move on, like, well, what's your typical grade of what works and what doesn't work? And I think the public is just way too strict about that stuff. Like, no, the trade worked. Like, they were in it. They had a chance of winning an NBA championship. And that was happening in the face of thinking that Golden State was just unbeatable, that no one could even challenge them. And Houston was like, all right, we'll try it. So I'd like to say that they should have stayed pat, stood pat, and, run it back. Golden State's out of the way. But there's all these different moving pieces going around it. It's hard to say, like, hey, we were really close, and now Golden State's gone, so we're just, we're the favorites now. And Daryl had said to us, hey, we think we're still the favorites. But Paul, as much as I've defended him, I mean, it's like a 75% chance he's not going to be healthy at the end of the year. And I don't know why you would think as he gets older it's going to get better. I mean, unless you were just going to shut him down for half the season without an injury, you hope, okay, at game 50 in the playoffs, he's still going to be as good as he can be. So, it's about, as Daryl said numerous times, it's about risk. And with Golden State, they decided to take on more and more risk. And without Golden State, it feels like they're taking on more risk with this move, with the payments, with the moving draft picks, because they feel like that, although the West doesn't have this immovable force at the top, the depth around it, it's like, man, in the second round, you're going to be facing a really good team. So I think that's what this move is about. If Paul, if they knew he was going to stay healthy and that he's this really, really durable point guard, I don't know that they make that move and take on the extra money, but that's just not the case for him as much as I'd like to defend him.
So last thing with Ryan Russillo here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. It's not just health with Chris Paul. I was hosting First Take today, and we talked to Kendrick Perkins, heard from Ryan Hollins, who played with Chris Paul as well. There's serious questions about Chris Paul's personality and his leadership style, and do guys get along with Chris Paul? So with the health concerns, the questions about who Chris Paul is as a personality, where does Chris Paul fit now? It looks like Oklahoma City is going to look for places to move him onto. Where would that be, Ryan?
Where would he want to go? I had heard from a pretty good source, look, he's obviously he's going to go OKC. You wonder if Miami would make a play for him. But at that point, it would be, hey, more kind of first-round assets and taking on the contract. There might have to be a third team involved. As much as we look at some of these contracts, we make mistakes for years. Like, oh, you never do that contract, or you're never going to be able to trade that. But there's no impossible contract to really what kind of price, what kind of attachments do you want to put in there to move the deal. And Miami might think of it as like, look, we didn't have one marketable guy in this entire team, and now we have Butler and Paul, and Spoelstra's a great coach, and now we're interesting, and now we're more competitive. I don't know if Milwaukee would look at where they were at halfway through the season, maybe after the season, and feel like, you know what, the number two, despite how good Middleton is off of Giannis, and if Paul's healthy and can still shoot, would Milwaukee be interested? So I think those are two teams to pay attention to. But you're bringing up a good point on the Paul thing. A lot of these guys feel like around the league that he's difficult to play with, and I don't know if that's all personality. Like, I love the guy, okay? I love the guy. But there are times when I watch him play where I get annoyed. I'm the guy that's been defending him the whole time. But is it all personality, or is it that, other guys get sick of somebody dribbling the air out of the ball the whole time? And his detractors will say that. I mean, I talked to front office guys that go, "Are you kidding me? He's one of the all-time most efficient playoff players ever. All these criticisms are ridiculous." I talked to other people that say it sucks to play with him because he yells at you the whole time, and because you're going to stand around and watch him dissect the defense. But if you were terrible at it, like, you would have more stats. But then I think, okay, so wait a minute. Are you telling me that Westbrook's an upgrade from that? You're telling me that playing with Westbrook is an upgrade from, like, at least Chris Paul makes shots. So, and I think, despite the rebounds for Westbrook and the assist numbers for Westbrook, I don't think every stat is created equal. And I'm actually kind of looking forward to Westbrook having other big guys say, wait a minute, we're just supposed to give you every single rebound? Like, how does that work? And
Clint Capella might not get he might get an email from Steven Adams. Hey, man, this is how it works.
Wouldn't that be great? Like, Capella's looking at him going, I don't understand. What's going on here? Like, why are you standing here near the free throw line? What's this?
Call Steven. He'll tell you. All right, it's Ryan Russillo, the host of the Russillo Show podcast, as well as SVP and Russillo. They have a new episode out next week. Thanks, man. Appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Have a good weekend.
See you. So there you have it. So where does Chris Paul end up? Ryan rattled off a couple of them. I find it fascinating, this reputation that Chris Paul has. The issue, according to, for example, Kendrick Perkins, who was on First Take today, is that Chris Paul is a negative leader. It's his personality. It's not about the basketball style. Ryan wondered aloud, is it basketball? Is it personality? A lot of guys don't like playing with Chris Paul. The answer is, according to several people like Ryan Hollins and Kendrick Perkins, it's Chris Paul's personality. He's negative. He yells at you. He manages from a negative point of view, not a pick you up positive point of view, but a what's wrong with you negative point of view. And dudes don't want to play around that. At the same time, this is a floor general who fit in Houston basketball-wise, I think better than Russell Westbrook, who has playoff experience, who I think can be of value to a team that needs to still be playing basketball the right way. Who is that? Miami is one. You could look for some kind of reunion in Detroit with Blake Griffin, but what I'm told is that is not something that would be welcomed. See the personality issues we just talked about from the past. I have wondered this aloud. I've heard no other person talk about this as a team, but I know that Rick Carlisle wants 2 ball handlers. The Dallas Mavericks have contracts to match Chris Paul's salary, but not many assets to entice the Thunder. Chris Paul would make sense next to Luka Doncic, makes sense next to Kristaps Porzingis, but could they pull off the deal? When you start talking about need, fit, and assets, I do think you continue to come back to the Miami Heat. So let's hit up the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Let's go to Darian in Queens. What's up, Darian? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hey, what's up, Will, man? First time caller.
What's up, man?
How you doing? Well, I think that Chris Paul should try to get his way to Philadelphia. Philadelphia. Philadelphia should give up Joel Embiid.
Joel Embiid. Okay, well, yeah. First of all, the trade idea isn't terrible. Giving up Joel Embiid is awful. You don't have to. First of all, even if you were willing to, Darian, you don't have to give up Joel Embiid to get Chris Paul. You can give up much, much less. God, I hope I meet you across from a negotiating table. Best offer first, boys. The thing is, man, a lot of people want a ball handler next to Ben Simmons. They want to get Ben Simmons down into the post. I don't know how that works with Embiid, but you can get Chris Paul to Philly for much less than trading away your franchise all-star.
No, we're not talking about a straight-up trade. Obviously, we're talking about even Danilo Gallinari. You get some of the Oklahoma picks because they're going to be back for a couple of years. And Ben Simmons can play down low.
I think
Paul
that
can
might
run
be
the
the
point
only place he can play.
because everybody's worrying about his shooting. How long is it going to take him to improve his shooting? But he can guard other bigs. He can facilitate. If you run Chris Paul, Ben Simmons in a pick and roll situation, Ben Simmons knows how to take care of the ball at the top of the key. He can make decisions. He can play defense. He can guard multiple positions. You surround him with.
So you would do this right now. You would do Joel Embiid for Chris Paul and Danilo Gallinari?
Picks. Absolutely.
Okay, I think you got a deal in Oklahoma City. I think they'll do it in a heartbeat. Sold. Sam Presti's on the other line. Waiting to talk to you, Darian. Thanks for the call, man. The Stephen A. Smith Show. You need seats to a game? Download the Vivid Seats app and enter promo code CHAMPS at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Don't buy just any seat. Get a Vivid seat. The phone lines are lit up. You can give me a call. It's Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. Smith on ESPN Radio.
Your radio, your computer, your phone.
Melvin Gordon, the Los Angeles Chargers running back, has told his team either sign me to an extension or trade me. The Chargers, who are in their championship contention window. The Chargers, one of the best and most well-rounded rosters in the NFL. Melvin Gordon, one of the best running backs in the NFL, are suddenly at an impasse. Here is Adam Schefter laying it all out for you on SportsCenter.
They're not close at all, which is why he chose today to come out and make that statement that unless there is a new contract before training camp opens in about 10 days, he will not show up then, nor will he show up at all this season until he has a new deal. And if he doesn't have a new deal, then he would like to be traded if the Chargers are not prepared to give him one. Now, the two sides have had talks, but they are not close at this point in time, so much so that, again, he felt compelled to come out and make this statement. And this leads to a very tricky situation in which each side is going to make its case before training camp. The Chargers feel like they've made a fair offer. Melvin Gordon feels like he should be paid amongst the top running backs in the game, right in the category. He's just not going to show up when he's scheduled to make $5.6 million.
Melvin Gordon is in the fifth year, his fifth-year option of his rookie contract. And as you heard Adam Schefter say there on SportsCenter, he's scheduled to make $5.6 million. Now, that is under the amount made by the top running backs in the NFL. As you know, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, Devonta Freeman, they're making figures like $13, $14, $15 million a year. And Melvin Gordon feels like the flashpoint. Melvin Gordon feels like the moment, the correction. Melvin Gordon feels like the story that dictates not just the future of the Los Angeles Chargers, not just Melvin Gordon's own finances, but the future of the running back position in the NFL.
Oklahoma City came to terms on an agreement, and this was done almost as soon as this auction started.
James Harden was certainly a driving force in the Rockets getting this deal done. He wanted to play with Russell Westbrook.
The relationship between Russell Westbrook and James Harden, they have history together.
I thought they said nobody wanted to play with Russ.
Houston obviously is in the mix. Yet again, this is a move that had to be made. I think from a talent perspective, it puts...
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
The stars continue to align in the NBA. The dynamic duo era is in full force. Russell Westbrook and James Harden are together, but can it work? The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance and making it easy to bundle your home and car insurance. Will Cain in for Stephen A. today. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on ESPN News or SiriusXM Channel 80. Let's hit up the phone lines for a moment. I promised you the one pair of alphas, the one pair of ball-dominant players in the NBA, in my recent memory, my lifetime, that came together and the sum was greater than each individual component. What they were together added up to more than apart. And it took some very special characteristics personality characteristics that I don't think they're fully celebrated for that made these guys achieve at the highest level. And in my estimation, they're the only ones in my lifetime. Now, are they the ones that serve as a model for Westbrook and Harden? Or do they serve as an exception that Harden and Westbrook could never emulate? I'll tell you who those are in just a moment here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. But first, Jamar in California. What's up, Jamar?
How you doing? So I just wanted to know, how do you not think that Melvin Gordon is a top 3 running back in the league, statistically speaking, when he's outperformed almost anybody besides, of course, the other guy in L.A.?
All right, so Jamar is hearkening back to something I said about half an hour ago. I said this. You can hang on here, Jamar, just for a minute. I said, you know what? Everybody's really good at being super excited and optimistic and being everybody's best friend and coming on television and go, that guy's top 5. Oh, yeah, that guy's top 5. Before you know it, they got 15 top 5 guys, but nobody ever keeps up with it because they stretch out all those names over like 3 months. If you keep track of most people's top 5s, you end up with about 12 dudes. Top 5 duos, top 5 players. No. I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to keep it consistent. And if it means that you think that's an insult to somebody, well, I'm sorry. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? What are we going to do? I got in an argument with Damian Woody on First Take today about whether or not Melvin Gordon is elite. I said, no, I don't think he's elite. I think Melvin Gordon is great. But in my estimation, elite is top 3 in the NFL. You can't have 10 elite dudes. A third of your starting running backs can't be elite. Otherwise, elite loses its meaning. I think Melvin Gordon, Jamar, comes in about 6th. That's where I would rank him in running backs. I said he's not elite because he's not top 3. Top 3 would be elite. And right now, the top 3 running backs, I think, would pretty easily be Ezekiel Elliott at number 1, Saquon Barkley at number 2, and Alvin Kamara at number 3. I will submit that Alvin Kamara has some proving to do on whether or not he can be the bell cow, whether or not he can handle the full load. But I still have Christian McCaffrey up there, Todd Gurley, and the only reason he's not higher and clearly in the top 3 is because of his knee. And then I'd probably go Melvin Gordon. That's why, Jamar. Nope, he's gone. Melvin Gordon's had injury issues. You got to understand that. Melvin Gordon is great. It's not an insult for me to say he's not a top 3 running back in the NFL. He's a great running back. It's an insult to everybody else if you keep putting 10 different dudes in the top 3. It's an insult to the concept of being elite. Let's hit up Edward in Tennessee. What's up, Edward? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Yeah, Will Cain. Good afternoon to you. Listen, I just wanted to say I agree with you about the Houston thing, but I think for different reasons. The reason I don't think they're going to be that successful has more to do with the type of players that they have. If you think about it, the biggest players involved, your Westbrook, your Harden, and your Mike D'Antoni, they just don't seem to perform well in pressure situations. And I don't understand why people think that just being together is going to end up changing that. There always seems to be some type of deficiency in their game that doesn't allow them to succeed in very pressure situations. And part of that might be a mentality thing, but you put all 3 of those guys together, and you're going to say who's going to lead the team when it comes time to win, and none of them seem to be able to do that. I mean, you take away Kevin Durant from Russell Westbrook, and he becomes a better player. He becomes a better teammate. There's something about that pairing
I agree.
That scares the heck out of me. So
I agree.
I think they're going to win the regular season. They're probably going to win a ton of games in the regular season, but when the pressure gets up there and what hits the fan, it's going to be a blame game thing. Media is probably going to contribute to it, but Russell Westbrook is not going to like the negative attention he gets, and that's going to cause him to overcompensate. And James Harden is going to go into his little ball, his passive aggressiveness, not play defense, not move without the ball, shoot the ball when he gets it. And it's going to, who knows, it could explode. And Mike D'Antoni is going to say,
I hear you, Edward.
I don't know what to do.
I got you.
What to do.
Now, people are going to call you a hater, Edward, but I think you're being a realist. They're going to say you're hating on them because you're recognizing the way things have been. And they like to say it's all going to be different when you put them together. And I agree with you. I don't get why if you take 2 individual problems, you got a team success. Like Russ had these problems in Oklahoma City and James had these problems in Houston, but you put them together and they're not problems anymore.
My opinion is what happens is everyone finds the variable that they think exists to make an excuse for the deficiency. Well, the reason James Harden had to play that way was because Chris Paul wasn't as good as he was.
Right,
but how do you explain
right.
Game 7 of last year when Chris Paul was injured, but James Harden played awful against Golden State?
I got you.
How do you explain Russell Westbrook and his performances in the playoffs when he has triple doubles? When he's scoring triple doubles, he's an MVP. He's one of the best players in the league, but yet in the playoffs he's performed poorly.
I got you.
His team is the problem.
All right, thanks for the call, Edward. I got you. I'm with you. Let me lay this out for you. So you point out, Edward points out, the personality issues, the playoff performance issues, the pressure issues. They both have problems individually, but we put them together and we're supposed to assume they all go away. How about this? Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Isolation plays in the NBA. They rank number 1 and number 4. But you put them together and that works. How about usage rate? They rank number 1 and number 2. But you put them together and that works. They're both 35% usage rate. Solo, ISO, drives to the basket. They rank number 1 and number 3. But you put them together and that's going to be solved. James Harden leads the league in unassisted baskets. Meanwhile, Russell Westbrook is one of the worst shooters in spot up, catch and shoot, jumpers, and three-point percentage in the NBA. But you put them together, and that's going to suddenly work? I don't understand the idea that two problems put together equals a solution. That seems to be what everybody is selling to me today. Now, I asked, where is an example of this? Where has this ever been done? Where have you taken two alphas, two top players in the NBA like this, and they have achieved at the highest level? They were capable of putting egos aside, ball dominance aside, playing team ball. Where in our lifetime have we seen something like that happen? To me, the one example I can really point to of where this worked was in Golden State with Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. Two drivers, two alphas. Two guys that commandeered their own teams. And yet, you put them together, and they were able to achieve at the highest level. Now, maybe you believe that's just because talent was insurmountable. Nobody could approximate their level of all-stars on the court. And I get that. That's part of it. I understand. But you know what else it took? It took some amazing deference, some amazing egos set aside. It took some amazing adaptation. Steph had to give up the keys, man. Steph took a secondary role. And at times, even KD did. How many superstars are willing to do that? I said it several times on the Will Cain show, that one of the assets, one of the attributes that we're not giving Kevin Durant full credit for, that is part of his greatness, is his willingness to fit into a system. That's a hard thing to ask of a superstar. But it's also a thing that has to be done in order to achieve at the highest levels. It's something that Kevin Durant did, and he should be getting credit for. Steph Curry has gotten credit for deferring in Golden State when they took on Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant should get some of that same credit. And now we're saying, can Russell Westbrook, or maybe now we're just even taking for granted that Russell Westbrook and James Harden are going to do something that in my lifetime, I really can only think of one example of superstars who have done it. Some would want to point to the Miami Heat with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. The difference was that Dwayne Wade was already on the tail end or past his prime. Who was going to be the main guy in the pecking order was more obvious. It was going to be LeBron James. Who was going to take the secondary role? It was more obvious. It was going to be Dwayne Wade. But in Golden State, that had to be worked out. It had to come together. It had to fit into a system, and it did. And it resulted in 2 NBA titles and 2 Finals MVPs for Kevin Durant. So why do we think that Mike D'Antoni can all of a sudden solve this riddle? One of the most complex, hardest riddles in the NBA. Why do we think Russell Westbrook and James Harden will be able to set aside their egos, fit together in basketball in a way that only a few have been ever able to accomplish? Why do we think 2 ISO players, individual players, are all of a sudden going to come together? Why do we think 2 problems are all of a sudden going to become a solution? Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. When we come back, I got a load of calls to take. You're on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and I'm going to hear from you. And if you missed any of the show today, including... Here's the numbers. The Men's World Cup generated $6 billion last year. in 2018. The Women's World Cup generated $131 million. $6 billion to $131 million. The men's player pool is paid out from a pool of $400 million. The women's player pool amounted to $30 million, much lower. And that's the number people like to point to. 400 big, 30 low. Discrimination. The men's player pool payout of $400 million, for what it's worth, by the way, is 7% of $6 billion. The women's payout of $30 million on a pool of $131 million is 20%. The women get 20%. The players receive 20% of the total revenues, where the men receive 7%. The economic reality underneath the conversation is that more people watch men's soccer across the globe. The World Cup pool is not just a little, but massively bigger. And you can point to, well, the Women's World Cup outrates the men's game. The Women's World Cup final outrated the men's final in the United States of America, where the U.S. women's team was playing. Of course it outrated. I don't even remember who was in the Men's World Cup final. I don't know. Germany and the Netherlands. I don't know. What was it? Brazil versus France. I don't know. And you don't either. Because we don't watch the World Cup for teams that don't involve the U.S. Not for the masses, not for the most of us. We watch when the U.S. is in, so of course the ratings are going to be higher in the U.S., but you think that echoes across the globe? Think it's the same? It's not even close. The reality is, in countries like Spain and Brazil and France and all across Africa and Asia, women's soccer isn't as popular as it is in the United States of America. And thus, the number of people watching the World Cup is vastly different, and the scale is vastly smaller. That's why the World Cup payout is so much less. $6 billion to $131 million.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
I don't know if you know this, but Dodgers, Cody Bellinger's having one hell of a year. He's batting .336 with 30 home runs and 71 RBIs. And this player resume is brought to you by Indeed. Used by over 3 million businesses for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio, and Will Cain is filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on all those same radio and television stations. Let's hit up the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. I want to go to Charles in North Carolina. What's up, Charles? Come on now, Charles. What happened? I'm so disappointed. Says on my call screen he's all upset with me. Charles is angry, and he's not even there. So disappointing. He even called me Will Smith. So far today, what I'm told is several callers have called in, and I have been called Will McCain, Wilt Chamberlain, and Will Smith. Wilt Chamberlain. Somebody called in and said, I want to talk to Wilt Chamberlain. He's not here. How do you go from Will Cain to Wilt Chamberlain? Filling in for Stephen A. today, we have Wilt Chamberlain. That would be interesting. Everybody mixing up my name, talking about the suit I'm wearing, telling me I had flavor. I walked into work today. First thing I said is, I never seen you with so much flavor. It's like, you know, kind of like linen-y, denim-y blue suit on. Meanwhile, everybody back in the control room in Bristol says I look like I'm headed to a summer wedding. I fully admit I'm a little over my skis on my outfit today, which you can see on ESPN News. All right, let's go to Ben in California. What's up, Ben? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Wilt Chamberlain.
Hey, Will, thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it. I have 2 reasons why the Westbrook trade works. First reason is the Rockets' offense has shooters and letting Westbrook attack lanes, open lanes, which is what his strength is. I wouldn't want him shooting threes. He's not a great 3-point shooter. That takes that out of the equation, and that's all the other shooters shoot. Second of all, in half court, Westbrook can run pick and roll option with Capella, and with their shooters, it spreads out the court, and it keeps their offense flowing. Those are 2 reasons why I think it could work. Chemistry issues are there, but they're there for every new duo. There's fit issues, there's chemistry issues, same as in every other duo.
Yeah, but Ben, here's the thing. Thanks for the call. LeBron James and Anthony Davis make sense. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George make sense. So many of these duos, we could keep going down the list. Giannis and Chris Middleton make sense. Penetrator, shooter. Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis makes sense. We haven't even seen it yet on the court. James Harden and Russell Westbrook doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. By the way, I always want to keep myself in check. Am I making sense? Am I staying consistent? I do want to read you one tweet that I got. You can hit me up at Will Cain. This guy named John McComb says, hey, you just had Le'Veon Bell at number 3 on your running back list yesterday, and today he's not even your top 6. You're out here saying everyone changes their top 5, but you're keeping it real? Come on, man. Good catch, John, and I deserve that. The reason why is I was putting together my top 5 list on the fly yesterday, and I do have trouble with where I slot Le'Veon Bell right now. Is it the Le'Veon Bell I saw was it 18 months ago now in Pittsburgh? Or is it a Le'Veon Bell that hasn't played football in a year and a half and is going to suit up behind a different offensive line with the New York Jets? I don't know what to do with Le'Veon Bell right now. I readily admit that. All right? I wasn't trying to slip one by you, but good catch. One more here before we go. Let me hit up Maverick in California. What's up, Maverick? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Quickly, Maverick.
Hey, Will Cain. Hey, I just want to say I think the Houston Rockets, they just want to basically fill the seats, fill the stands. They just wanted to get a guy with a triple-double that always gets a triple-double to join James Harden. And I agree with one of the other guys that was talking earlier.
Yep.
He played with James Harden and Kevin Durant for multiple years, and they couldn't do nothing. So for Houston to think that this is like a godsend.
Yep. I got you, man. I got you. It's an ill fit. We're going to have to see how it works together. Hey, baseball season rolls along. Tune in tomorrow as Cody Bellinger and the Dodgers visit the Red Sox, presented by Indeed. Coverage begins at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.